straight into the Seder, and Seder means order. Ladies and gents, my question to you today is, why do we use a Haggadah at the Pesach Seder? And my answer is in order to say the right words. So let's begin our Seders, because in 2 weeks from tomorrow, you will, please God, be sitting with your family or at friends or at the retreat or wherever you will be, and it is time for your Seder. And of course, what does Seder mean? Order. There's an order, there's a sequence. I know certain things in life we prefer to not have an order, to not be prescriptive and to have rules and regulations and restrictions. But Pesach is one of those times where it's specifically the order, the sequence of events that helps us to tap into the energy of the day and to celebrate the Pesach in the right way. Now, the truth is, in most Haggadahs, I should have brought a Haggadah with me this morning. That's an important thing to have. It shows you that there are 15 steps of your Seder, 15 steps or simanim that are recited actually at the beginning of the Seder. So we remind ourselves how the Seder works. If you want, we could quickly sing that song. In fact, there's at least 2 tunes that I know. And of course, the reason to sing it, and many people say it before the Seder, is so that you just remind yourself the steps. And the steps are Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachza Motzi Matzah Maror Koreich Shulchan Areich Safum Beirach Halel Nirtzah. So that gave you 15 steps there. And I think I doubled in the middle. That's why you saw me going like it at the end. The motzi and the matzah, because one is motzi and the other is matzah. All right. The tune I grew up singing before the Seder was Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachza Motzi Matzah Mara Korech Shulchan Oirech Tzafum Beirach Halel Nirtzah. So now that you know the steps, let's talk about the steps and remind ourselves what we need to do and how we need to do it. Okay, so you remind yourself the 15 steps before you begin. In Yiddish, we used to tell ourselves when we came home, Kadesh, gleich when the Tate kommt daheim from shul, immediately when the father comes home from shul, because usually the mothers are at home the first night of Pesach, frantically preparing for this major event, a big dinner, and everything that precedes and follows. And don't forget where I grew up, there was no domestic help, or there was, but it was at a very big cost. So, and on Pesach, we took in our best and finest dishes. And of course, we needed to help out, and everybody had their jobs and chores. One of my jobs every year, Erev Pesach, somehow it landed on me, was to peel and grate the maror. Boy, was that a task. It cleaned out my sinuses. I didn't know about sinuses back then. So instead, I just cried and had tears. It was lots and lots of fun. Okay. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, ladies and gents, today we're going to go through these 15 steps. Let's start with the very first step. Kadesh, when the Tate kommt daheim from shul, immediately when the father gets home from shul, macht men gleich Kiddush. Immediately we start with making Kiddush. Every single Jewish festival and Shabbos is sanctified with a sacramental cup of wine. And if not wine, remember the stories I told you, you could use grape juice. And if you're allergic to wine and grape juice, talk to your halachic authority to see if there's another option for you. But ideally, it should be on red wine. Of course, if the white wine is better, you could do a white wine, but mix in a little red because we want to remind ourselves of the blood that was spilled when our ancestors left their bondage in Egypt. So, or perhaps we're also recalling the actual slavery and how many people were murdered. It's part of the experience of remembering it. So we're told specifically to use red wine or red grape juice. But everyone, all participants are going to make Kiddush. And there's a particular tune for the Kiddush. If I had a voice, I would sing it for you. Since it's not Friday night this year, it starts off Savri Marana, or an Ashkenazic. You would continue Marana Baraboisai. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Ronnie, you want to continue? Asher b'chabanu mikolam, v'roi v'manu mikoloshem, v'kiddeshanu b'mitzvosav. V'atitem lanu Hashem Elokeinu be'ava, moyadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sasoim, es yom chag hamatzos hazeh, es yom tov mikra kodesh hazeh. So as you can tell, it's a very joyous and beautiful Kiddush. And like every Yom Tov, we start off with Kiddush, but we do it right away because that's two things. First of all, we want to make the Kiddush immediately as soon as we come home from shul. Second of all, we want that everybody should participate. Whereas maybe on a usual Friday night, just the head of the household or maybe those over bar mitzvah are going to recite Kiddush. On this night, everybody participates. Everyone is regal and royal. I mean, the truth is, you're always regal and royal, but on this particular night, everyone participates in making the Kiddush. You make sure that your cup is full. I chose the wrong picture because this guy's cup ain't so full. All right. And as with all four cups that night, there has to be a particular minimum requirement of wine that you or grape juice that you're going to drink. And that is 86 milliliters, I believe. What, did you have a different amount?
No.
Okay. And make sure it's overflowing, okay? Because you want your blessings to overflow. There's a verse that says, Koisi Revaya, you sing it on Friday nights. It's in Psalm 23 of Tehillim. And you want your cup to overflow with blessings. So lift your cup up. I'm going to recite the text of the Kiddush. And remember that at the end of the Kiddush, there's a beautiful song. Shecheyanu, v'kiyemanu, v'higiyanu lazman has. Take over. I'm sorry. This cough better get away before Pesach comes, because I can't have Pesach and cough. I'm sorry. I should keep singing, and that will help the cough go away. Does it? All right. I'll try. I'll keep. You just saw me singing. It didn't help very much, did it? Okay, good. And if you don't understand Hebrew, what should you do? Say it in Zulu. Okay, if you don't understand Zulu, then say it in Afrikaans or whatever language you understand, or even English. Okay? The language you understand is ideal for you to say it in. But maybe you should read it before and read the translation. So you could say it in the Hebrew because you're praising Hashem with the sanctified holy language, and that would be the ideal. When you are done, you don't just gulp down this cup. By the way, if you have a choice between a big, nice glass or a small, pretty becher like this one, a goblet, which one should you use? The small one, because you're supposed to drink roiv kais, which means the majority of the cup. So if it's 86 mil, you want to drink at least 60 of it or something, because it has to be like 2/3. So you want to drink the majority of it. But also, not only that you are drinking most of the cup, there's a particular way to drink it. How do you drink it? You recline in your seat to the left side, and this is the traditional way to demonstrate that we are free and noble royalty. We are nobility this night. Royalty and nobility used to eat and drink in this fashion of reclining to the left. And so all the particular rituals that are specific for this night, that are associated with freedom, are going to be done in the reclining fashion. Not the maror, because the maror is bitter herbs. It reminds us of our slavery. So for the maror, you're not going to recline. But for the korech sandwich, you are going to recline, because slaves didn't get bride roasted lamb chops with relish inside their matzah lafas. I don't remember. Let's try to think. That's why I need a Haggadah. Anyone have a Haggadah? I took one. I prepared one. I forgot to bring it. Now I just don't remember. Do we recline for karpas? We're about to get there now. I don't think so. I think, but no, the karpas isn't only about the tears. It's the salt water, the tears. I have a feeling you do recline for the karpas. I don't remember, but you certainly don't recline for the maror. It's two different things. We're going to talk about the karpas now, because the karpas is not exactly the same as the maror. Yeah, but the karpas has more to it than just tears. So the next step is called urchatz. Urchatz is washing your hands without a bracha. Yes. Okay. Now, washing your hands without a bracha. There's a few things behind it. First of all, in the times of the temple, whenever you took part of any ritual, like what are they called? I don't remember the names. The truma, maestros, right? So you had to be conscious of the status of the ritual purity of this product that you're consuming. So just as coming in contact with a wet vegetable can contract ritual impurity, which although today we don't follow the rules of Tuma and Tahara because we don't have the temple, so it's not followed to the T, but we wash our hands prior to handling the vegetable, not just on Pesach night, by the way. Anytime you're going to touch a pickle, let's say, that's in brine, you're supposed to wash your hands before in the same prescribed way as you would for bread or matzah. But if you're taking it out with a fork, let's say another example would be, there's lots of examples, you're eating pickle that's going to be in a brine. You're supposed to wash your hands before. Olives. Yeah, but you don't say the bracha because you only say the bracha for hametz. It's about removing impurity from your hands. A lot of people, instead of washing their hands, will just use a fork. By the way, if you're eating bread as a digression, don't eat it on Pesach, please. That's a big no-no. But if you're eating bread year-round, you're going on a holiday or something, and you don't have a washing facility, you're in Kruger, and you're afraid that if you get out of the car, you might become with the food of the next animal walking by, then you can put your bread into a serviette. If you're not touching it, you can eat without washing. What you call a little loophole. But we talked about loopholes yesterday with the Erev Tafshilin. Hope you found that as an interesting insight about the concept, the idea, the different days. There's weekday, there's Yom Tov, there's Shabbos, and why Avraham Avinu, the Torah says, observed the concept of Erev Tafshilin even before God gave us the Torah. The profound insight that it starts on the weekday, and it could start during the week when there's challenges and struggles, and you could carry through onto the good day, to Yom Tov, and ultimately usher in Shabbos Kodesh. That's in a nutshell what we talked for an hour yesterday. All right, we said the first step, Kadesh, second step, Urchatz. Now we're up to the third step, which is Karpas.
And your cigarette
Kaddish is making Kiddush. Kaddish is an active form of reciting. For those watching why I'm doing this,
or what
this
does
is
anybody else?
top of me trying to challenge. I don't know what
Very
it is.
nice.
I don't know if you can see it.
So
Anyways,
do it.
a very important part of the Seder as
You
we
want
get
to
to
take your
Karpas
lap
is
in your hand
education.
here.
And education is a key ingredient to the Pesach Seder, as it is in general. The mitzvah of the Pesach Seder is v'higada televincha, to tell the story to your children. I, as a rabbi, if I want people to listen to me, one of the ways I find to do that is to get people's curiosity. Otherwise, I see people in shul, as soon as I get up to speak, this one's walking out. So where are you going? He needs a haircut. I said, but why do you need a haircut now? He says, I didn't need one before. The next one is he pulls out a newspaper. This one's on their phone. I don't even know if they realize that it's so menschlich. These are menschlich people. But anyways, that's life. That's the way it is. What could I do? These are things, maybe I'm just not so interested. But what you have to do is catch people's curiosity. Do things to get them. And this is one of the things our sages say. We do just to get the curiosity of the children. And in fact, we're going to add it into the questions later. Right? In fact, in the Chabad tradition, this is the first of the 4 questions. Why do we dip things? We don't ordinarily. You want to dip your chips into hummus, into matbucha, into guacamole, gesundheit. You don't want to dip, don't dip. On this night, we don't dip once, but we dip twice. Once the karpas in salt water, and the second time the maror in the charosas. So we're doing things bizarre, strange, peculiar, enigmatic. Any other adjectives there? Things just so we could get the children's curiosity. Why? That's why you ask, where's Clive? Ask why.
What, you walk straight through?
Yes, but it's to get the kids curious. Stephen, speak up. I can't hear you. Awake, yes, alert. Yeah, it's true. Because we did our Seder plates a little bit last week, this is what your Seder plate looks like. It's really neat and fancy. If anyone gets the Seder plate to look this good, you are in, let's see, there we go. There's a full Seder plate. So we did the Seder plate setup last week. Let's see if I could put on some kind of can I put on a screen, black presenter view, pointer options. There we go. Okay, we're gonna point here. Can everybody see? Okay, so that's your, I don't know how to use this pointer, but this is what it's doing. Showing you the various items of your Seder. If you want, we can move to the top of the Seder for a second, just so everybody sees what's going on the Seder plate. So here you got your egg, the beitzah. In Hebrew, in Aramaic, the egg is called be'ah, which means to want, that God wanted us. Here you have your zro'ah. Zro'ah is the shank bone. But God took us out of Egypt with an outstretched arm, which is zro'ah natuya. And of course, that is anthropomorphically or figuratively speaking. But also, my friends, in the Chabad tradition, since you mentioned Chabad, the custom is not to use a shank bone, but rather to use a little chicken neck. Oh, you could get them at Maishi's for how much? 30 random fingers? I don't know. Some ridiculous price to buy a neck, which usually is free. But, let's find ways to make a couple of bucks. The next is maror. Maror, right there. There's two sets of maror, bitter herbs. And then we have right here the charoses, which is a mortar-like paste. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it just now. And we're missing one thing. The karpas. We didn't do the top here. The egg. While I was doing the zroa, the baits. Oh, I did say it. You're right. So the chagiga. That's maror. That's the second. There's two marors. One maror. This is the horseradish, and this one is the lettuce. Chazeret, yes. And this is for the karpas. Okay. So you got it. Tov ma'od. Can everybody see? Now you can see a little better. Now you can see. Okay, so we're back to the karpas. If you need to come into Chabad house, you need a karpas. I know for Torah Academy, you certainly need one. Let's talk a little bit about the karpas. We said this is a way to get the children curious and interested in what's going on. Now, usually after you wash your hands, we're going straight to eat the meal. You're going to have challah and have a meal. But here we change it up. We do something different instead because we want the kids to be curious. So what do? You take your karpas, which could be a vegetable. Either in this picture, you're seeing parsley. We tend to use potato, boiled potato, and onions. But again, different customs. And you're going to dip it into the salt water. Okay, that reminds you of the bitter tears. It tastes salty. You ever taste your tears? So, as the bitter tears of our enslaved ancestors, it's a 5D experience. It's multi-sensory. We want this to be an experience that everybody taps into and really, really gets into it and experiences it. And you're going to make a bracha. Don't forget, macha bracha, macha bracha. Before you eat something, you say a bracha. What bracha will you say on this? Bare priadama, and you're going to dip it into the salt water and eat it. The fact that we're performing certain acts strictly to get the kids asking questions, this teaches us an important thing about education. Sometimes we have to get creative. If people in my shul are pulling out newspapers and walking out when I speak, it means either I'm boring or I'm repetitive, or I'm monotonous, or I don't know what, or maybe they heard it already, whatever it may be, and that's why they may be walking out. So we have to get creative and find ways to get them interested. Not just the young, not just pedagogically speaking, which is the way you teach youngsters, but also andragogically, the way you teach adults. When we want to relay a message to our youth, particularly, instead of taking a hammer and forcing the kids to sit and to listen, if we get a little bit creative, get them involved, we can find ways to keep their attention, you'll have them a lot more engaged and involved. Of course, the key to learning is inquisitiveness. Children need to be taught to ask questions, right? We could just tell them what Pesach is all about, but we prefer that they ask questions and that we relate the story as an answer to questions, which is why this night we have lots of questions and answers. And of course, in this way, there's a much better chance that they'll be listening. I try that in shul sometimes. I'll ask questions, engage people. Even if they give the wrong answer, it's better to at least have everybody engaged. And it also teaches them to continue to ask questions, to seek meaning in everything that they see. In fact, the idea is, what was I going to say about questions? I had a thought, which just skipped my head. But as a kid, my father used to teach me, now the way he would say, learn well, ask good questions, no shame, no game. Unfortunately, I can't say I was that type of a kid necessarily, but you should never turn kids away from asking questions. It's important to ask questions. Ask good questions. That's a good thing to do. Of course, even if there's no kids at the Seder, even if it's just adults alone, the messages of education are important. It's universal. It's relevant to all of us. Therefore, asking questions. Ask questions of Hashem. Today's day and age, it's easiest to ask questions. If I have a question, I'm not sure the answer, you know what I do? Pull out my phone and I ask Rabbi Dr. Google. Yep. Now, of course, if it comes to Jewish matters, you want to go to the right source. I would say if you're asking a medical question, make sure also you go to the right source, because Google can have all types of funny answers it gives you. And you never know which denomination of Judaism it's sending you to and if they're giving you something correct. So if you want to know how Chabad does it, just type in your question and add in Chabad or whatever it might be. And medically too, you might come up with all types of funny answers legally as well. And you cannot tell a judge what Google said. I was once called to court because a guy happened to not be Jewish. He used to come to my shul sometimes. He wound up in trouble and he shoplifted in a store. And now he got caught and was arrested. And when the judge asked him for, what did you do? He says, the rabbi told me you're allowed to steal to survive. It's true, I did tell him that. I also, maybe I didn't mention don't get caught. But, Abyssal Seichel Darf Man Haben, right? It was part of a shiur where I mentioned this. And what am I supposed to do? So I did give a character reference for him, but I said he misconstrued my words. And I said he's a nice guy as far as I know. Can't take responsibility for the fact that he stole there. But, you got to, yes, halachically, to survive, you can do anything except for three things. You can't kill somebody to survive unless it's self-defense. You cannot betray God by worshiping idols. And you cannot commit adultery just to survive. They tell you, have some fun and I'll let you live. Sorry. There are certain red flags, red zones we don't cross, and those are them. But otherwise, yes, you could even steal to survive, but you also have to pay it back. And, I'm sure he could have had another way to survive than just taking something off the shelf at Checkers and then getting into trouble. And I said, all right, so let's use the karpas. Oh, yeah, you could have come up with a plan. Anyways, let's use the karpas to think about the aspects of Judaism that we should really be exploring further ourselves, not just children. We are young at heart and certainly should be finding ways, ask questions, particularly on Pesach is the time to be asking questions. Kadesh Orchatz Karpas. We did 3 steps so far. What step are we up to now? Step 4, Yachatz. Yachatz. Kuranu Yachatz. Wrong song. Sorry, that's Yachat. What is yachatz? Before we begin reciting the bulk of the Haggadah, which is probably the biggest part of the Seder, unless that's the Shulchan Aruch, the meal, we do three things. First of all, we're going to take out the middle of our three matzahs. I don't know if we talked about that either. You talked about Chabad Seder, set up the Seder at the Cairo. So going back to that for a second, I hope we're not going too much out of order. You know, my father had a nice fancy Seder plate, but then I discovered a Chabad custom, his Seder plate was a nice one, and underneath it, you put your matzahs. And each matzah had its compartment, its shelf. It was really beautiful. I personally like that. I don't know why in Chabad custom, maybe in Russia, they were poor, so they never came up with this contraption. So instead, they just put everything on top of the matzahs. Of course, nothing on the matzah itself. There was always something partitioning the matzahs. 3 sets of matzah, Kohen Levi Yisrael, or Kli, which is an acronym, or a vessel. You also put it in the concave way, like a receptacle. So, you know, the typical handmade matzahs are concave. Although Rabbi Hecht told me that he saw new matzahs at Kosher World this year, which are handmade up until they get into the oven. They get to the oven, they're machine. And it's considered proper handmade shmora matzah because every single step was taken, but it's more hygienic. And then the oven is like a what do they call those things in the airport and shops have it, conveyor belt. And it goes into the oven. The oven is unlike the typical oven, like the one we have here for our model matzah baking, and most ovens that are used for baking. This is like a grate. So it goes onto the grate. And I guess because it's so hot, it's being heated from top and bottom, the matzahs are not concave. They're actually all flat. And then nobody handles it once it comes out of the oven. It moves through the oven and nobody handles it. It's then handled by a machine. And you could buy it at Kosher World. I think it's like under 700 rand a box, a kilo. So it's well priced as well. Now, about 700 rand a kilo. Yeah. You think that's expensive? Go see what handmade shmora matzah is for some reason. You know, a Bentley is always more expensive. Handmade is always going to be more expensive. Yeah, it's lechem ani. Yeah, you're poor after you pay for it. Now 1 box, a kilo. The 3 sections. Yeah, we do that as well. We give that to all our guests at the retreat. And that's what we use in my parents' home. But the difference I was saying is that some people have a nice kaira. We actually give out pretty kairas. We set them up. Every person gets a beautiful kaira at the plate. But many people just put the stuff not in a kaira, but directly on their matzah cover. Either way. The matzah cover must have to be compartments. You don't just have to be matzahs in there. They have to be separated. If your matzah cover does not have to be compartments, then put serviettes between your matzahs so that they're separated as Kohen Levi Yisrael. And that's how you can differentiate. You're taking out the middle matzah, and that middle matzah is going to be cracked now. You're going to break it in half. And that's what makes it lechem oni, since you asked about. There's a few reasons it's lechem oni. It's expensive. People can't afford it. After you pay for it, you become impoverished. I'm joking about all that. Now's where it becomes lechem oni. There's where it's because you're breaking it in half. So this is turning it into poor man's bread because we say a poor people would really have a complete piece of food. I have to share with you a digression. I forget the name of the author, but it's a Jewish guy, I believe, from 50, 100 years ago. One of those children's books authors. Maybe Bernstein. I don't remember which one it was. I'll check it out later. This guy wrote a book. He has a story called The Missing. I don't even know what it's called. It's about a missing part of the wheel. And it's about a wheel that was missing a sliver, a slice, a wedge. And therefore, this wheel was always in search for its missing part because it couldn't roll properly, you can imagine. And while it's looking for its missing part, it really got to get a good scenic view. It was limping. And when you limp, you go a little slower, as you know. Maybe as you get a little older, also you wind up going a little slower than you used to. And as it would go on its journey, it would see all these different things, and it's looking out for its missing piece. It would see the flowers and the scenery and the children playing and the cars and you name it, everything was on this beautiful landscape and picturesque views. But one day, lo and behold, it said the right prayer and found his missing part. Guess what? As soon as he got his missing wedge, reconnected, and the wheel started flying. Zoom, floom, boom. There was only one problem. We didn't get to appreciate the environment and everything else. And this story, obviously, it's a nice fantasy that the author took to write, but it also tells us something in life. Sometimes, maybe when you're broken, when you're missing something, you also get to appreciate other things. And in that sense, I say as well that this piece of bread that's of matzah, that's broken, it reminds us about our slavery. Matzah reminds us of two things: the bread we ate in Egypt, because as poor people, they didn't give us bread at a time you were slaves. Slaves didn't get proper bread. Slaves got bread that didn't have time to rise. And it also reminds us that we left Egypt in a hurry. It's two symbolisms. So in that sense, we have both symbolisms here. The middle broken matzah is going to be the larger piece is put away to be consumed later for Afi Kaman, right? And let me see, did I put that up? No, I didn't put it here. I'm going to get that in a second. Afi Kaman, we'll have another slide for that just now. And Kabbalistically, it's broken into how many pieces? How many? Nope. 5, very good. 5, what reason? To sweeten the 5 levels of Gevurah, 5. I don't know mysticism very well myself, but that's what I read on Chabad.org. Now the bigger piece is broken into 5 and put into the Afikaman bag, hidden away, either be snatched by the kids or found and redeemed. They get to hold you ransom, and you get them a prize with it. No, it's one piece that's broken into 5 and put into the Afikaman bag. Okay. The smaller piece, what do you do with that? Put it back into your bag, and you're going to recite the Haggadah, all of Magid, on that piece. Okay? Now you pour a second cup of wine, just like the first one in which you made Kiddush, but you are not going to drink it just yet. We are going to recite the story, Magid, over this cup of wine now. It's still empty because we haven't filled it yet, but now it's time to fill it. Okay? What would you say are the highlights of Magid? I won't go through them today, although I would, again, should have brought my Haggadah, and we could go through Magid. I think it would be a good, worthwhile thing to do. In fact, you want to just bring me a siddur. In the siddur we have it. There's a siddur right there. Right there, I see an art scroll siddur right in front of you. There we go. Let's look at that, and let's look at a few highlights of the Haggadah, which are worthwhile. Toda rabba lecha. Thank you so much. Let's look at this and Haggadah. Let's find the Haggadah here. Next Shabbos, by the way, Shabbos Haggadah, we read through the much of Magid as well. It's sort of a rehearsal, but we're doing a little bit of a rehearsal already now. Okay? So let me just see, why did I miss it? Maybe they don't have it in the art scroll. Only Chabad puts it in? Chabad one for sure has it. There's a Chabad one. I'll go to the table of contents. But yeah, that's true. You know? Let's see. Bedikas Chametz, Erev Tafshilin, Kiddush Lo Pesach. It has Bedikas Chametz, but it doesn't seem to have the Haggadah in it. So what do people using the art scroll siddur do when Pesach, when Shabbos Haggadah comes around? They open an actual Haggadah, I guess. Not on the Chumash, no. But we have a Chabad siddur here. We'll look at the Chabad siddur. No, but the blue one with English, better. It has it in there. Yeah. All right, let's open this. We're going to do this now. We'll just look at a few points, a few highlights in the Haggadah to look at. All right. If you have the siddur, want to follow along, the Haggadah is on page. It's on page 398. All right. We start off with Ginai. We start off on a low. Oh, tada. That's very kind of you. All right. In this siddur, you don't need to use it. You could use an actual Haggadah. All right. I'm not going through the whole thing. Don't worry. Like I said, I'll just go through a few highlights. We start off with Avadim Hayinu Hayinu Barabim Mitzrayim B'Mitzrayim Avadim Hayinu. We start off with Alo, that we were slaves in Egypt. Okay, and actually, not only that, we're going to say on the next page, Mitchila of the Avodah Zarah Hayu Avosenu. Our ancestors were idol worshippers. We start on a low. We recognize in life sometimes we have our shortcomings, our problems. Failure is not getting knocked down. Failure is only if stay down. You don't get up. I get knocked down. I get back up again. All right. Another great part of the Haggadah here is Vihisha Amda. Ronnie, can you give us a special version? Vihisha Amda Lavotenu. Vihisha Amda Lavotenu Velanu. Shelo Echad Bilvad. Amad Aleinu Lechalotenu. Amad Aleinu Lechalotenu. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Matzilenu, Matzilenu Miyadam. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Matzilenu, Matzilenu Miyadam. All right, I won't bore you with my singing. We missed an important part, the 4 questions. All right, don't forget the 4 questions. Again, these are ways of, this is the children asking the questions. They notice the differences, the various different things at the table. And so we ask the questions. Again, reminder, even if there's no children present at your Seder, but nevertheless, it is important that we ask the questions of ourselves. In fact, one of the parts we start the Haggadah with is this is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Whoever is hungry, let them come in and eat. Well, let me ask you a question. If you intend to invite guests, shouldn't you have invited them a little earlier? Does it help to invite somebody who's sitting down for dinner already? And maybe the answer is that you need to invite yourself. There's a part of us that's spiritually impoverished. We need to invite ourselves to tune in to the energy, to the moment of the Seder. And that's perhaps why we are saying this. We're inviting ourselves and we ask Hashem for answers and we ask ourselves, don't use Google on your Seder night. But the point is, learn, explore. You're never too old to learn, are you? Some people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That might be true about dogs, but Homo sapiens are not dogs, okay? And this is where we begin telling the story. It's the opportunity where we fulfill the mitzvah, Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, to tell the story, okay? And this is the way we start. We start on a low and we move to a high. The narrative of the Haggadah use this whole pattern together. We were idol worshippers. Now we're learning. We believe in one God. We were bondsmen, slaves in Egypt. Now we're emancipated, right? So we lead through the story of God's deliverance, God's liberating our ancestors, emancipating from the slavery, and how we ultimately landed in this euphoric high at the redemption. And we pray for the future redemptions, which is the end of the Haggadah, which we'll get to in a moment. So there's various highlights. We looked at Avadim Hayinu, the 4 sons. Maybe we'll spend some time. 4 sons, 4 sons. Each, how did the song go? Each one is different. Everyone's different. Maybe there's a part of ourselves that's like all four in one. You know the story about the guy who goes from Chelm to Vilna. He comes back to Chelm. They ask him, "No, Yankel, what did you see in Vilna?" He says, "I went into the big shul there, grand big synagogue, and I met a Jew who was ultra orthodox. He had long teis and a big hat and a strangel and I met a Jew who's an atheist, and I met a Jew who's super religious, I met a Jew who's anti-religious, I met a Jew who's socialist, I met a Jew who's communist, I met a Jew who's capitalist, I met a Jew who's Zionist, I met a Jew who's anti-Zionist, I met a Jew who's wealthy, I met a Jew who's poor." He's describing all these different types of Jews. It's a big deal. We have all these types of Jews right here in Chelm. He says, no, this is one guy. He gives everything together. And I think sometimes we talk about the four children. We sometimes have all four personalities, split personality. That's why when we go places, I always ask for the group discount. You know how many personalities in here? All right. Other highlights, the 10 plagues. What are the 10 plagues? The fifth son, that's right. The fifth child is the one who's not present at the Seder, unfortunately. Unfortunately, there are people who are completely apathetic, ignorant, not interested. And there's a difference between ignorance and apathy, another difference. I don't know and I don't care, actually. But they're lost. There are people who are lost, absolutely. And so we have to try to invite them, going back to your candle for Ukraine, which is beautiful. What the Rebbe was saying about the empty seat at the Seder that many people were advocating for. He said, nice, add an empty seat and a third seat and a fourth seat, and don't keep them empty. Fill them up with people. Invite friends to your Seder, invite neighbors, invite people who otherwise wouldn't be there. All right. Then the 10 plagues. A drop of wine is poured from the glass for each one of the plagues. And this connotes that we do not overly rejoice about anyone's suffering. We're pouring out a little bit each time. Even though these vile Egyptians persecuted us, and we're remembering the plagues with which God smited them. Nevertheless, we pour out a little bit of the wine because we don't rejoice. Do not rejoice at the downfall of your enemy. What's another good song here? Ilu ilu atzianu atzianu min Mitzrayim atzianu min Mitzrayim dayenu 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 dayenu. Fun song we're all familiar with, and we count many of our blessings in life. Sometimes we got to just realize how many blessings we have. All right, think about it. Think about all your assets and all the millions you have hidden away somewhere. And would you be willing to give, if God forbid you were missing a limb or an organ or anything, you know, if you didn't have your eyesight in the morning, or if you weren't, who knows what, would you be willing to give up that money to restore those abilities? Think about that. Now, regardless of how much you choose to say in your Haggadah, it's not that much. I know some people go, oh my gosh, it's so long. It's not so long. Please do me a favor. You could do it quite quickly. But anyways, if you find it too long, think about the most important parts. One of the most important parts here is towards the end. And you should make every effort to recite those highlights where the Haggadah discusses the 3 mitzvahs of Pesach. What are they? Pesach, Matzah, Maror. Okay, and there's a Rabbi Gamliel we mentioned here who said that whoever doesn't recite these 3 things on Pesach night has not fulfilled their obligation. Okay, so remember, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And when you recite these, speak of each of them. You look at the corresponding item on the Seder plate. So go back to your Seder plate here. All right, and you look at each of these items as you recite them. Okay. You look at it, and as you're reciting, you say Pesach, you look at the shank bone. Some people even lift it up while they say it. Matzah, you lift up your matzah, or at least look at it. The Chabad custom is just to look at it. So you open up, you expose your matzah to them. And maror, you look at your bitter herbs, or you actually lift them as some people do. Okay. The conclusion of Magid here pivots to reciting the beginning chapters of Hallel. We're shifting the focus away from storytelling to giving thanks, which is what Dayenu is. It would have been enough. And there's lots of things in life. Had I, just coming into this world is enough. God took us out of Egypt would have been enough. And we go through each of these sets, which maybe we could talk more about tomorrow. But I wanted to at least have one class where we could go through the whole Seder, and we're only holding it like step Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid. We're still in step 5. You want to get through all 15, I better put the pedal to the metal. Okay, which I'm going to do right now. So the Magid concludes with this bracha, which is Asher Ga'alanu Ga'al Aviseinu, praising God for the exodus of Egypt, that God redeemed them and us. Ed Kachu was the mayor of New York when I was a kid. He was a born and bred Yankee. And yet, once when he met with Chief Rabbi Lau of Israel, who we all know was one of the young Holocaust survivors, he was a child of 8 or something in 1945 when he was liberated from Buchenwald. And he said to Rabbi Lau, I'm also a survivor. Rabbi Lau looked at him in surprise. How could you be a survivor? I was in the concentration camps. You were in New York. And Ed Koch said, look, maybe I didn't go through the atrocities and horrors that you endured and experienced, but you should know that Hitler Yamach Shelo, the Zichro, had a map of all the Jews in the whole world. He had numbers pinned to every location, even a place that had just one Jew. He had a pin there, one Jew. And his ultimate plan was to rid the world of the Jewish parasite, the disease called the Jewish race. So I also am a survivor. When we say this bracha, we say Asher Ga'alem, that God redeemed us. Asher Ga'alanu, that God redeemed us. The Ga'al Aviseinu. Was I ever in Egypt? No. But we realized that if God didn't liberate them, I wouldn't have survived today. And not only that, we realize that there are many times in our life that we have opportunities to be grateful for all the miracles, like that God performed miracles and wonders for our ancestors. We say this when we light the menorah. We say this before we read the Megillah. The same thing. And we praise God not only for the emancipation, liberation from their Egyptian bondage, but expressing our hope for the future redemption speedily in our days. And how do we conclude Magid? What do? Don't gulp, but drink down your second cup of wine. Again, in the same manner, we first saying Hagafen, leaning to the left. And of course, yes, each cup has its own independent value as a mitzvah. There's 4 cups, each one is a mitzvah, and therefore, each one warrants a separate bracha, and you do say another bracha. Really interesting. I guess in the Chabad custom, I'll just say the Chabad custom is that we say the bracha before we drink. You only have one after bracha. I'm not sure exactly the reason, but that is the law. All right, step 6. Making a motzi. What's step 6? Motzi. Now you go wash. Yes, you wash your hands just like you would for bread. Same ritual way. And after motzi comes matzah. Number 7 is the matzah. You see how quick I could do it if I wanted to? And now we're going to fulfill the biblical mitzvah, the commandment to eat matzah on Pesach night. We are going to make 2 brachas on the matzah. One is the usual Hamotzi Lech Min Haaretz. The second one, al achilas matzah. And you eat the matzah while reclining. Again, 4th reclining. There is a minimum, a minimum shiur that is half an average size shmura matzah to eat that. Okay, so you make sure you eat that minimum size. Let's think for a moment, something that comes to mind. We had 2 cups of wine, we're now eating matzah. As rational human beings, by the way, you're going to eat from both matzahs. I think the top and the middle matzah at this point, if I recall correctly. Double check inside your, I got it. Yes, but you have to have lechem mishnah, so you're going to hold both the top and the bottom matzah. You're only going to eat from the top 2. The bottom one will be used for the next step, the Hillel sandwich. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Koreth, yeah. But there's a deeper message between the matzah and wine dynamic that I wanted to share with you. As rational human beings, we attempt to understand and appreciate the things that we do. And this applies obviously to our Judaism as well. Wine symbolizes this endeavor. Wine is something we could taste, we could savor, we could appreciate. You ever listen to a wine connoisseur talk about wine, the volume, the flavor, it has hints of mints and this and that, and they sound very sophisticated, right? All the experts. Historically, matzah has been the food of the poor and the slaves, right? It's simple to make. If you don't have to be careful about chametz, of course, that it has to be done in 18 minutes. There's nothing complex about the taste of matzah. It's simple. It's just flour and water. And this symbolizes another element of our relationship with God. When we don't taste it, we don't appreciate, we don't understand. Ultimately, Judaism requires a mix of both. We can't only celebrate our Judaism in a way that is limited to what we like the wine. If it has flavor and taste, I like it. If not, forget about it. We can't limit to just following orders by rote either, okay? Both faith and appreciation are necessary components for Jewish life. You need to have both. So you need the faith and flavor. Faith, emunah, the matzah is bread of faith. There's no taste to it. The Jews left in a hurry, that God will take them, and in the desert, they didn't know what will be. But yet there's the wine, there's the appreciation, the flavor. And when you think about the Seder, there are aspects of the Seder that we relate to very strongly, that make sense, and yet there are parts of the Seder that are bizarre, peculiar. What are we doing? And the trick is to try to embrace both. So if you think about it, before you eat the matzah, what do? We wash our hands. Now, most of human activity is through the hands, action, right? We use our hands. So it's critical that we always remain conscious that our hands remain clean and pure. These are external extremities. And it means to use them for doing positive things. Do good with our hands. We're reminded of this by our obligation that we have to wash our hands. When COVID came around, Jews had an advantage that already ritually we are sanitizing, right? And in the ritual sense, we wash our hands numerous times a day, including before eating, before davening, come out of the bathroom. You touched a part of your body that's not supposed to be exposed, you wash your hands. Okay, so you have to realize that when we use our hands to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah, we are using it for a mitzvah. We wash our hands before as well. That was step 7. Motzi was 6. Magid Rachza was 6. Motzi was 7. Matzah was 8. Now we're up to step 9, which is maror. All right. Here you got a lot more sweetness. Here you got a lot more karpas. We're now going to fulfill the mitzvah to eat maror on Pesach night. You take the lettuce and the horseradish and you dip it into the, what's that? Charoset. But I'll tell you what, you're not supposed to put a lot amount. A lot of people take a lot, and I don't know why the picture is a lot. You're actually supposed to put just a small amount. Tastes nice. Eat it afterwards. Okay? And it's crucial that we always remain humble. We remind ourselves where we came from. The maror is the bitterness, right? So you're taking this horseradish, you're taking the lettuce, which if it's left unharvested, we know that lettuce can become, it starts off sweet, but the lettuce unharvested could become very bitter. And so you dip it into the charoset, we want to add a little bit of sweetness. We're no longer in slavery. And we say the bracha al achilat maror. We eat it, but unlike with the matzah before, and unlike with the wine, we are not going to recline. Okay. I was talking about the idea of the concept that the lettuce, which we're using, can, if left unharvested, can become very, very, very bitter. So in life as well, they tried to, when they enslaved us, at the beginning, it was pleasant, but then it got difficult. As darkness is a vital test to the strength of light. You know, they say you only appreciate light more so. Here in South Africa, we appreciate light a lot more than others do because we have load shedding, right? So goodness is more appreciated when we know evil, right? And so freedom would go unnoticed and unappreciated without the concurrent contrast of slavery. So while this night we are celebrating our liberation and our freedom, we eat the maror, the bitter herbs. It's not to put us back in a state of slavery and oppression, but it's so we appreciate the redemption even better. Think about that. Okay. Now, what's that? Yeah. No, we're not going to say Hadama again. We said it earlier and we had it in mind. Yes, so you have in mind when you eat the karpas, you're going to have in mind the maror later. You say the bracha Hadama when you eat the karpas, you're going to have in mind the Hadama later. Just to change the order up a bit, to create a little bit of inquisitiveness, to do things differently. Why are we doing something bizarre this night? There are, yes, specifically Pesach. And the reason is, of course, to get people curious and get people wondering what's going on. What's this? A sandwich. Long before McDonald's or anyone else came out with sandwiches, Jews were always first. And Hillel, he was the one who used to say, take your korban Pesach, take your flesh, your lamb chops, and you're going to put it into your matzah, which was probably more like a lafa. And don't forget the maror, the bitter, it's relish. You know, people like relish, mustard, or whatever you like to put in there. I don't know if mustard seed, I think it's actually kitniot. So we don't use it on Pesach, but you could put in, you could, you're Sephardic. Yeah. A problem. You cannot, in Chabad custom, not just Chabad, many Jews are stringent about this, but if it's your custom, even if it isn't, nothing wrong with, they say, some people say there's two types of Jews, those who are Chabad and those who aren't Chabad yet. So Miriam wants that everybody should be in the right level, ideally, right? So then in the Chabad custom, we actually spend a lot of time drying off that lettuce. You're gonna take some paper towels before, dry off your lettuce to make sure that it's not going to get your matzah wet. Very good point. Why is that? I talked about it this year last week, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But it's a stringency. Once matzah is baked, it is not able to become chametz. However, there was a chashash, a concern that was once mentioned by one of the great sages hundreds of years ago. I don't remember who, maybe even in the Gemara. That is it possible that maybe there are little bits of flour that didn't get properly baked in the oven? And if that could come in contact, not the matzah, with the flour that was left on it. The truth is, I will tell you, some of the boxes of matzah that I open, I haven't seen it with these that come from Ukraine, but I've definitely seen it from the Brooklyn Matzah Bakery in New York. I find there's a lot of wheat in those matzah boxes. You open it, and you find little pieces of wheat because the matzah bakery is filled with wheat. That could be a big problem. If that wheat comes in contact with water, it can become chametz. So the idea is it's a stringency, a chumrah. But God forbid to say anybody who doesn't do this chumrah is eating chametz. Heaven defend. Okay. But here's the best part of the night. Step 9. What's step 9? That's right. Food time. Time to have some good food. Shulchan Aruch. What's on your menu? I will tell you, most people start off their menu with what? Eating the egg from the Seder plate. What does the egg symbolize? Life. Okay, it's the symbol of life. It's a symbol of the cycle of life, which is why a mourner eats it. And it's chosen to symbolize the fact that we mourn that we don't have our temple and that we don't have the korban chagiga. So the egg reminds us of the korban chagiga, and therefore we're going to eat it at the Pesach Seder. So, yeah, but there are people who get a little bit edgy. They're waiting for the meal, and they think like all you eat is bitter herbs and matzah, like what's going on? So here's the meal, and you make sure to eat a nice, lavish meal and get merry, sing songs, drink more wine. Make sure to eat a hearty, delicious, delectable meal as you will. You don't have to recline during the dinner, only for the ritual parts that we discussed. And obviously tonight is the night that the Korban Pesach, that the Paschal lamb. So since our temple no longer stands, we eat something else in memoriam, which is the egg. The meat on the Seder plate is a visual testimony, but we do not eat it. In fact, we do not eat lamb at all on the first night of Pesach. Because, that's right. I know we like lamb chops. They're good for fry, but not on the Pesach night because we don't have the temple. And we mourn, like we said, we're eating that egg to mourn. So it's not a time to mourn. It's a joyous time for sure. But still, you want to symbolize it by, we feel that we're missing the temple, therefore we don't eat lamb. But there's plenty of other good Pesach food to eat, okay? Plenty goodies. Now, what substitutes the lamb? Yeah, the egg we said substitutes the Korban Chagiga, the festival offering. What substitutes the lamb? Afikoman. Here we come. You want dessert? You want ice cream? You want sorbet? You want fruit? You want chocolate souffle? I don't know what you want. Eat it, but before the afikoman. This will be your ultimate dessert. Afikoman is the ultimate dessert. It's the final food you'll be eating tonight. And a lot of people have a custom for the children to look and fight and get prizes, etc. Make sure they don't hold you to ransom for too much. And like I mentioned last week in the shiur, it should not be. We discourage the concept of theft. It's better to reward the kids for the manishtana. Yeah. Yes. In South Africa, that's not a problem. In Brooklyn or Russia, it's more of a problem. I think my Seder in Russia started around 10 p.m. It gets late. It starts very late. In New York, maybe 8, 9 o'clock. Here, there's no reason you can't start your Seder before 7 p.m. 7 the latest. There's no reason people can't be home from shul by 7 o'clock. My schedule typically is, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half from Kiddush to dinner. And then I would say we're done dinner by 10 o'clock the latest. And then there's time for the next steps that we're doing now, which is Tzafun, Afikoman. And what comes after Tzafun? One more cup of wine. What's now? Fill up another cup of wine. Actually, you're going to fill up 2 cups of wine. Why 2 cups of wine? Eliyahu Anavi, Eliyahu Atishbi, Eliyahu Hagiladi. Eliyahu Anavi is one of the most beloved of the Jewish prophets. There are numerous Jewish teachings regarding the special role of the prophet Eliyahu, and most famously that he's going to herald the coming of Mashiach. So while Mashiach can come anytime, and please God, even before Pesach, right? But there are times that are most opportune and propitious for Mashiach's arrival for redemption. And the night of Pesach, which was the anniversary of the original redemption from Egypt, is an especially auspicious time for the final redemption. And therefore, just as we commemorate the Exodus from Egypt with 4 cups of wine, so too we pour an additional cup of wine on this night to symbolize our anticipation and expectation of the future redemption, which will be announced and heralded by Eliyahu HaNavi. So you're going to pour another cup of wine for Eliyahu, and with this, you're going to get ready to bench. Okay. Benching, that's called Tzafun Beirach, or Barech, depending on your custom. And after that, Hallel. What's Hallel? Praise. Okay. Oh, don't forget benching. Hallel. Hallel. We're going to sing Hashem's praises. Okay, I want to go back to benching for a second. Thought. During the Seder, we made a lot of pre-blessings, right? So now we're going to make that after blessing. And interestingly, one of the after only benching is actually biblically mandated. The blessings we say before are not, they are rabbinic. Why is that? And one interesting answer is that when we are hungry, we really forget God, right? It's especially when we are sated that we take God for granted and we focus on ourselves. And so the biblical obligation to thank God for what we had is after we ate. You know, sometimes people forget. Exactly, uberachta, right? So saying please when we really need something is much easier than saying thank you after getting it. So this is your opportunity to say thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that? Well, let's go back to that for a second because the afikoman. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so there's two different rules going on. Number one is Rambam is talking from a health perspective. From a health perspective, that's year-round, that applies. What Ronnie said is the achalta, you ate, visavata, you're satisfied. Satisfaction for everyone's a little different. Actually, according to Rambam, based on what you're saying, satisfaction should come is when you ate your whatever it is, just enough. But particularly Pesach, I want to say, you are having your meal. You eat plenty because there's a biblical commandment, and we talked about it in last week's shir, that the afikoma, which is symbolizing the korban Pesach, was to be eaten on a full stomach. You actually had to be full. Ordinarily, you eat when you're a poor person, a slave in Egypt eats when they're given food. A rich person, Princess Diana in that famous story goes into Buckingham Palace's kitchen when she wants, although she gets reprimanded by Queen Elizabeth for it. But the point is, rich people eat whether they're hungry or even if they're not hungry. You want an ice cream, you want to eat something, you eat when you like, when you prefer to. And that's an important part of the afikoman, is to be eaten when you are full. Full for each person might be something else, but particularly this night you eat when you're full. And Rambam actually talks a lot about this, but it doesn't contradict the idea of not overeating. You could be full without overeating. But remember, this is your dessert. Okay, so if you want your chocolate and ice cream, eat it before. All right. So we said, you can't skip the afikoman. It's a mitzvah. The dessert. Yeah? Which Jew does that?
Well, there's one Jew who might do that to Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's the man that fasts for 18 hours a day.
And yet you can't even tell. Hasn't helped. Because in 8 hours, or the 6 hours, 16 hours a day, not 18. In the 8 hours that I do eat, I make up for it. All right. I was just thinking, I'm practicing that self-constraint. It's something Hasidus tells us. It's called the skafia and ishapta. Skafia is that resistance to say, I don't have to eat. And anytime, you ever feel, shucks, I missed that dessert at the wedding, and they had a whole smorgasbord, and they had what do they call, Viennese table? What's going to happen if you didn't get that cookie? You know what it looks like at the bracha? I'll put on a video for you in a minute to show you what some shul brachas look like. I'll conclude with that. In fact, let's finish the Seder now, and we'll talk about the rest of the stuff another time. I just want to finish the Seder. So let's finish up here. We talked about benching. I had something I wanted to tell you about benching. I don't remember. But the point is to say it's easier to say please than it is to say thank you sometimes. All right. After benching, drink your third cup. Like the first two, you're going to say the bracha hagafen and recline. After that, you're going to sing Hallel. Hallel starts off with the words Yahalelucha, Hashem Chamasecha, may all your, there's one more thing. With Elijah, you're going to go out there or the ladies go out with the candles to greet Elijah the prophet. And during that time, we say Shvei Chamas Chalagoyim, we say particular passages that I mentioned in the Haggadah, and now you're going to continue with your praises of Hashem. Hallel consists of our singing God's praises. That's what it is. Some of the prayers may be familiar from Shabbos morning davening, as these are added passages of praise that were curated specifically for the Seder night. Now you might ask, does God really, really have such low self-esteem? Does God really need us to sing his praises? Is that really the case? For us, maybe it boosts our ego. If we hear people, you sang my praises, I feel good. It's a pat on my back. But the answer is that we're not singing God's praises for Hashem. Who are we singing it for? Ourselves, that's right. To impress upon ourselves, to remind ourselves of all the good that God has provided for us, for our ancestors, and God has the ability to continue providing for us in the future as well. And it's a powerful time to pray for what you need. So you take a moment to think about one blessing in your life, and then you'll think about more blessings in your life. And that is an extremely meaningful way to make it personal and real, which we said is the important thing to do at the Seder. I'm not sure. You got to ask that to the author of the Haggadah. Okay, and then give us an answer. All right, remember, you are going to conclude there's a lot there. We end with Yishtabach, and we're going to drink one more cup. What do we end with? L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem. Many people also end with the words Chasal Seder Pesach, which means we have reached the end of the ritual of Pesach. Will you find that in the Chabad Haggadah? No, you won't. It's not a Chabad custom, as the Pesach experience is meant to stay with us the entire year. On a most basic level, outside of Israel, this is true in a very real sense, because we're going to do the very same Seder the next night, right? But while the motions are the same, make sure the goal is to experience something that you hadn't experienced the first night. Make it real, make it personal, do what you can. And let's end on this thought for today. All this beautiful ritualistic stuff that we do at the Seder, which whether you do it at home with your family or at a retreat or wherever you go, it's an experience that is unmatched in all of Judaism. Many of our rituals are performed in shul or in other communal spaces, while the mitzvahs performed at home are either brief, right? You light the menorah and you're done. Or maybe a Shabbos meal, you do it every week, you're used to it. But to sit around a table together and to perform so many different mitzvahs and to recite so much text to the Haggadah and praises of Hashem together, it is unique, it is exhilarating, and therefore it is something special that we should tap into. Pesach isn't just about remembering our ancestors. It's not just his story that they left Egypt, but we should remind ourselves it's an opportunity for us also to relive and re-experience this freedom in our own lives, to personally envision ourselves leaving Egypt. What Egypt? You're wondering. I'm not enslaved. I'm not in Egypt, right? There's no Lord presiding over me with a whip and telling me what to do, shouting orders. Thank God, right? And this is true for most of the modern world, although slavery does still exist in some ways. But Egypt has many different forms. And as with a moment's thought and a generous dollop of honesty, you can readily identify those patterns, those situations, those toxic people or events in your life that are holding you hostage in some way or another. And whether it's stress in your professional life, or exhaustion in family life, or negative associations in religious life, think of any others, There are many pharaohs in Egypt that make up the storyline of our past. And as Pesach gallops closer and closer, or we gallop towards it, on the Seder night, remember, with all of its auditory and tactile items and everything we're going to be doing, it's meant to bring us back to the past, to steer down our own Egypts that we experienced, to look our own pharaohs in the eye and to say, no more. Tonight, God redeemed my people, and I am one of them. Just as God redeemed a band of millions of slaves so many thousands of years ago, God can and will redeem me too. And this strong theme of redemption brings us to the theme of the future redemption, with which we end our Seder, L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. We pray for the coming of Mashiach. And when we poured the glass for Eliyahu Hanavi, we very much anticipate this, and we do actions to activate, to feel that, right? We raise our eyes to heaven. We ask God, please bring about the redemption. Bring about redemption for us personally in our own Egypts, and collectively, universally, for the entire world, that we should all experience redemption. What's that? Right there, right at the very end of the Seder, after Yishtabach. Okay, any questions? I want to show you that little video that somebody sent me about what some of our Seder, Shul Kiddushes look like. Okay, give me a second. I'm just going to share this video. Everybody could see it. Just a second. Tell us a story while I'm finding the video. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Very cute. Very cute. Okay. We're gonna, let me get this video. Somebody sent it to me on WhatsApp. So I'm going to open it here and tell me if you could relate to your Shul Kiddush to any of this. All right, ladies and gents, putting it on the screen. Can everybody see? Go. All right, see you all tomorrow. Shekach, everyone.